True Crime Time. Tonight I wanted to talk about the DoorDash delivery warrant. This one's very interesting because there's so many unanswered questions behind this warrant.
True Crime King, back. How we doing, guys? I just put another video out literally about an hour ago with the Crime Circus reaction, so check that out too. And so this will be my first time reacting to this True Crime Time. He's talking about Bryan Kohberger, the DoorDash driver too. So while I'm on this subject, I might as well stick with it, right? Here we go.
First of all, we don't know who the DoorDash delivery driver was. They haven't named this person yet. The other thing that's interesting here is the delivery occurred at roughly 4 a.m., so just minutes before the murders happened that night in Moscow.
That is a little suspicious. I will give everybody that. I still don't believe Kohberger was the DoorDash driver at this moment in time.
And then finally, we don't know what this particular driver may have seen after making the delivery or even before, as they were driving into the neighborhood and Bryan was circling around. There are even some people who think that Bryan Kohberger could have been the DoorDash delivery driver.
Yeah, like Crime Circus and Drip Drop, they believe Kohberger was the DoorDash driver. I am not convinced, really, almost at all right now.
So I do want to take a look at this warrant with you tonight, and then I think we can answer some questions here on why law enforcement did issue this warrant, what they found from this warrant, and then finally I'm going to let you know if I think Bryan was the DoorDash delivery driver or not, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah, let's see who True Crime Time agrees with, the King or Crime Circus.
So let's start just by reviewing the warrant here. This warrant was issued to the DoorDash legal department via email. So the warrant was obtained by law enforcement or by Detective Mallory on December 6th, and then it was served on December 6th by email. DoorDash responded the very next day on December 7th. And what they were looking for were any records of any deliveries that occurred to the house at 1122 King Road dating back to January 1st of 2022 to present, so up until December 6th, essentially, when they served that.
Now, this is going to be big, huge, right? Because if they actually have a legitimate name and there's a legitimate person that said he made or she made that delivery, then that cuts Kohberger out, right?
That warrant. So they were looking for date and time of any sales, date and time of any deliveries, purchases, and or transactions, the name and ID of the driver, a full description of the vehicles used, and any and all communications between drivers and the purchasers. And then, again, they served this to their legal department, the DoorDash legal department, via email. So overall, this was pretty early on in the investigation. This was just about 3 weeks after, about 23 days after the murders occurred, when they were serving this warrant to DoorDash. So again, we don't know who the driver is, we don't know what they saw, but we do know that they were there just minutes before the murders happened. So I can understand if some people might think that Bryan Kohberger could have been the DoorDash delivery driver. However, I don't think that's the case here, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay, so he agrees with the King, and let's see why he agrees with me.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the timing of the obtaining of this warrant. Now, this warrant was obtained on December 6th of 2022, like I mentioned, just 3 weeks after the murders occurred. Now, this was also just about 6 days after they had identified Bryan's white Elantra, when that WSU officer ran his plate, and then they also ran it a little bit later that day, I believe it was November 29th, and they had identified a white Elantra connected to Bryan Kohberger. So this was just about 6 days after that occurred. Now, this, in my opinion, supports the fact that law enforcement was issuing this warrant because they were still trying to identify the DoorDash driver. I believe that on December 6th, they were still trying to eliminate suspects and they were still looking for witnesses. The fact that they were obtaining a warrant for DoorDash tells me that they did figure out that the DoorDash delivery had occurred, and they were now taking steps to look further into that evidence.
That's what I mean. So they probably got that information back from DoorDash. Okay, it was a legitimate person. They actually went and talked to that person, figured out exactly what car he or she had, you know, asked what he or she delivered to the King Road address, and asked who she gave it to and all that. And then that totally clears Kohberger of being the DoorDasher, in my opinion, okay? So that's why I believe this. That he was not, Bryan Kohberger was not the DoorDash driver.
They found, I don't know if it was because of that bag that was on the sink. Maybe they found a receipt in the bag and they figured out, whoa, this was ordered pretty close to the time of the murders, and put it together, and then executed this warrant with DoorDash. DoorDash responded on 12/7. Now, I think when DoorDash responded on 12/7, that's when law enforcement identified the DoorDash delivery driver, and then they spoke to that DoorDash delivery driver, and he provided more information about that night. Oh. I don't think they were issuing this DoorDash warrant because they had suspicion that Bryan Kohberger was the DoorDash driver at that time. This was earlier in the investigation. They hadn't put that piece of the puzzle together yet, and they were still trying to figure out who the DoorDash driver was, and they wanted to talk to that person. Now, it's also possible that that person came forward and talked to law enforcement as a result.
That's a possibility too. They offered their, they knew a crime occurred at their house where they made that, delivery at 4 a.m. the night before, and they call it. That's also a totally legitimate possibility.
As a result of that, they issued the warrant to get additional records, just in the process of looking into every person. Just because a person comes forward and speaks to the police and tells them, yeah, I was the DoorDash driver and I dropped off the food and I left, they're probably still having to take steps to clear that DoorDash driver as a suspect. Now, that's really important here, and I think this is part of why we're getting to see a glimpse of this evidence over other things, is because this is actually showing that the prosecution did their due diligence, and they didn't just focus in on one person. Maybe they had their eye on Bryan on 12/6, but they were still taking steps to look into other people and eliminate other suspects. The defense always likes to say, oh, they just focused in on one person and they didn't look at anybody else, and they missed all these pieces of evidence. Well, in this case, if they can show, hey, we looked into many other people, and here's an example, and then probably other examples, that's definitely going to bode well, right? They had the Tinder accounts that they looked into. So they were investigating other people early on in this case, trying to figure out any other connections. Another thing that supports this idea is if we look at the affidavit here, we can see that
there's just too much evidence that supports Kohberger not being the DoorDash driver, okay? And him probably not having any knowledge it was even coming, to be honest with you. It was probably just a random thing that happened, and something that he couldn't plan for, You can't plan for that, right?
Law enforcement applied for a warrant on December 23rd for Bryan's phone records. So they were still investigating Bryan as late as December 23rd here. So remember, the DoorDash warrant was served on December 6th, well before this. Yeah. So that DoorDash warrant was part of their standard investigation.
Yeah, so they got that warrant back on December 6th, okay? And so they have plenty of time to figure out if it was Kohberger, right? So yeah, I just wanted to make this video and tell you guys why I don't believe he's the DoorDash. He was the DoorDash driver, but if some other evidence comes out, I could change my mind. But at this point, it is what it is. I know a lot of prominent YouTubers like Drip Drop and Crime Circus think otherwise, but hey, We all have our opinions, right? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you agree with me, hit the like button. And until next time, guys, True Crime King, out.